Welcome back to the Neurostimulation Podcast, where we explore cutting edge science, innovative therapies, and the future of brain health. I'm Michael Passmore, and today we have an exciting guest, Dr. Tom Ingegno, a leader in integrative medicine with over 2 decades of clinical experience. Dr. Tom is the owner of Charm City Integrative Health, a clinic that blends traditional Eastern medicine with modern biohacking techniques. He's an expert in acupuncture, cupping therapy, red light therapy, cryotherapy, and much more. His work has been called The Future of Medicine by futurist David Houle, and his best-selling book, The Cupping Book, is helping bring an ancient healing practice back into modern households. Dr. Tom also co-hosts the podcast Irreverent Health, where he and his co-hosts tackle unconventional health topics with humor and insight. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Tom to the Neurostimulation Podcast.
Hey, Michael, thanks so much for having me on.
Great, good stuff. Thanks so much for joining. Dr. Tom, you've been in the field of integrative health for over 2 decades. I'm curious what first inspired you to pursue East Asian medicine and acupuncture.
Yeah, so I had, the notion in my head growing up that I was going to be an MD, right? I thought that was the way I'd be able to help, uh, and I was pre-med in college and through a course of events that I had very little control over, but really kind of flavored and shifted the path for me. It included like a Tai Chi class that I took as like an after school kind of elective. And then a book which randomly found its way into my parents' basement when I came home from school, which was about a relatively modern, I believe in the 40s and 50s, Taoist sect. And it really started, they even referenced these weird esoteric types of acupuncture in it. But it really started this twist where it was like, well, maybe there's another way. Um, During my junior year, I got a postcard in the mail from an acupuncture school that had an open house, and during that Christmas break, I went to the open house, and I was enrolled before my second semester of my junior year. And I never looked back. I mean, even moving to Baltimore, I'm originally from Long Island, New York. Um, when I was looking to move to Baltimore, I ended up going online looking for the requirements for my state licensure, and there was an animal acupuncture certificate, right? Like we can treat animals in this state. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. What does that look like? I called the board and the board was telling me, no, you got to call the school. The school is the one that runs the program. I called the school. It was like March 1st. St. Patty's Day is March 17th. They're like, we're starting St. Patty's Day. So, within 3 days, I was signed up. And, within 2 weeks, I was taking classes to become certified in animal acupuncture. And that, I mean, that pretty much sums up how everything happened in my career. It's like going with the flow. I hate to say that, it sounds kind of trite, but really the things that were really great weren't a fight, and the things that,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying certain things aren't worth fighting for, but when it was right, it was really right.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's in a way, it's inspiring in terms of just following your interests and then having the serendipitous things happen that lead you in a certain direction. It's awesome.
Yeah, I often use that word serendipity, right? I think one of the reasons that I do the podcast with Matt, I know we were talking about that before, is that curiosity, and I think we both share that, right? So, when you look at anything with one half of your brain, whether it's really analytical, yeah, I often joke that if I didn't end up here, I'd either be a geneticist or I wouldn't do a damn thing. And you have to be very linear with genetics, right? And even when they talk about expression and things like that, kind of funny. But within that, looking at Western medicine now after 24 years of doing acupuncture, it's like, oh, that's not linear at all either.
Yeah.
It's under this guise, right? These RCTs and here's the information. And it's like, well, they tell everybody, regardless of what your healthcare license is, the patients
Mm,
don't read the textbooks. And it's like the number of times somebody comes in and says, I have this diagnosis. And I go, you don't have any of those symptoms. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally.
Well, that's what they said I have. And it's,
Yeah.
at least in Chinese medicine, it matters
Mm,
more about the way the patient is presenting to you rather than,
mm,
hey, I've got this lab work back and it's saying this, right? We want that lab work. We want to be able to, confirm what we think is going on. But
yeah.
a lot of times it's very confusing. And I think that's another reason why I was drawn to East Asian medicine is,
Mm,
what the patient says, what the patient is experiencing in a lot of cases is more important than what any test result says, you know?
totally. Totally. Yeah. It really is a fascinating topic. I mean, being here in Vancouver, we have a very multicultural kind of community and particularly East Asian. And so I've
Mhm.
been long fascinated by, we walk into our, I guess you'd call it Chinatown neighborhood, and there are these really fascinating stores with all kinds of herbal
Yeah.
preparations and all this kind of really cool stuff. And it always struck me that, coming through the Western medical training tradition and it being very productive and analytical and now kind of captured in many ways by the pharmaco-industrial complex, which influences the research that all of the doctors get taught. And so that, kind of it basically funnels our practicing and prescribing based on guidelines that are funded by industry. And so there's a lot of capture that I think causes trouble. And so expanding, patient options into alternative health and especially the Eastern tradition, which is much more holistic. And I think, as
Mhm.
you say, takes into account the client or patient's individual circumstances in a really respectful and mindful kind of manner. So yeah, it would be really interesting if you could speak to that. I
Yeah.
think that's so
It
valuable.
I and this isn't, I think maybe when I was younger, when I was in school, it was this like us versus them thing. Here in Baltimore, we have some amazing medical institutions. Johns Hopkins has an amazing medical program. Um, and I'm not seeing that from the practitioners. I'm not seeing that from the students. I mean, they have me go and lecture to them. Yeah, and it's one of these things where everyone in the field knows that that's missing, right? Like there's this, we're trying to reduce people to numbers and blood work and diagnostic tests, um, and they realize that sacrifices bedside manner, that sacrifices sometimes common sense because this is the protocol. Well, the patient doesn't want that, right? Even when we talk about evidence-based medicine, right? That's become a pretty big buzzword in healthcare communities. Immediately we go to those RCTs, right? Those are our gold standards. But that Venn diagram isn't just RCTs, right? It's what does the patient want? What is the practitioner's experience, right? And that's really where we get the best outcomes. And even though, yes, pharmaceutical companies here in the US, insurance companies have a strong hold on how we do things and what we do. Um, but the desire from the patients, and I believe the practitioners, I mean, when COVID hit here, when we were finally allowed to reopen, right? We were not considered urgent care, which I'm not going to comment whether that was right or wrong. It doesn't make sense for me to go into the office and treat one patient for 8 hours, but when we reopened, those first people that came back were all Western medical staff.
Mm,
The doctors, the nurses, the PAs, everybody that was running those hospitals, and a lot of it was to cope with not a disease, but the stressors, the situation, right? That was something that we can't diagnose that. That doesn't have a term that is not in, there's no diagnosis code for that. We can't bill insurance for that. But at the same time, the value was there because of that non-tangible, non-quantifiable benefit.
yeah.
And we have a lot of patients that are coming in using East Asian medicine, I think, in a much better way, right? So Chinese medicine has this term yangshen, which means nourishing life. right?
Mhm.
And now we have recently I've seen doctorates in lifestyle medicine. And I looked at the curriculum thinking, "Oh my god, this has got to be really cutting edge." And it's like, yes, it gets very scientific, it gets very cerebral, it gets very analytical, but it's like, here's how you tell your patients how to sleep. Here's how you tell your patients what to eat. Here's how you tell your patients how to move. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, fundamentally, that is part and parcel of being alive and human.
Yeah.
And that has always been part of what we call alternative or classical medicines. Um, we're even seeing that happen in mental health, and mental health is a great example because that's quote unquote a softer science as well. So, of course, they're adding Ayurveda in. Of course, they're doing yoga and mindfulness practices from other Eastern traditions, and I
Right.
believe that yields so much better outcomes for patients. And look, God forbid I got cancer. Depending on the type, the severity, and all those things, I think long and hard before doing chemo, and that's not a no. But you bet your ass I would also be doing these practices. I would be changing my diet. I would be incorporating herbs, making sure that I double up on my meditation, my qigong, those kind of things.
Mhm.
Because you don't have to tease out. Uh, and I also like this field, and I'm going to separate herbal medicine out a little bit here because everyone thinks they're herbs, they're safe, and it's like no, some of these are very toxic, and
Mhm.
a lot of good people probably hurt themselves figuring that out for us to be able to use today, right? And a lot of pharmaceuticals, we forget this. My grandfather was a pharmacist. We had jars. He would collect old timey jars, belladonna, cocaine, all these old jars. And it's like
Yeah, yeah.
some of this stuff was pretty toxic. But it came from plant sources. It came
Yeah.
from minerals. It came from animal sources. Um, so I'm going to keep herbal medicine out of this. But in a lot of these practices that we do traditionally, they're safe. So worst case scenario, you're just placeboing yourself, which even in itself has value. If I can
Sure.
convince myself I'm better, what the hell do I care if he gave me a sugar pill?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, so I like that because that risk reward, it's all reward, or it's
Mhm.
nothing. It's not,
Right.
oh my God, I took this drug and now I've damaged my kidneys. And I'm not anti-drug by any means.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, even like Western prescription, we'll call it medication, there's
Yeah.
tons, and especially mental health, there's tons of placebo effect. But I agree with you. I mean, why not take advantage of that? But it strikes me that the other things that you referred to that I think often go overlooked or under recognized, partly because, say for instance, in our system here in Canada, a lot of family doctor colleagues are constrained by time. And, you're going to, if you have, say, 10, 15, 20 minutes to spend with a patient on a certain complaint, it's not really efficient to be asking them so much about things like foundation, which I think foundational things like sleep and diet and exercise and nutrition, you're going to get to the problem. And then your line of questioning is very geared towards, okay, what's the quick fix that I can offer this person so that I can move on to the next patient in 20
Yeah.
minutes. Right. And so the whole setup here is kind of, it doesn't allow for an
I'm
attention to
just
be paid
surprised you
to the
guys get 20
foundation.
minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think it's about 6.5 in the US.
Something like that.
And
Yeah.
and
That's a
this is
luxury.
why so many people, if they've got the ways and the means, not only are the practitioners shifting to concierge medicine, but a lot of the patients are. Why? Because they can call their doc and the doc will answer. And
Yeah.
if it's an hour-long conversation, it's an hour-long conversation. And the outliers, the people that want to do the weird stuff like me, can call and go, look, is this going to kill me? Will you write me the script? What should I be looking for? And I think one, it puts that partnership back into the healthcare relationship, which is
Yeah.
truly like a classical thing, right? The doctor would show up with
Mhm.
his bag at your house and treat you right then and there. And when was he done?
Yeah.
When he was done. It wasn't like, oh, I got a waiting room full of people and you're not the sickest, so I got to move you on.
Yeah. 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 The partnership aspect to it. I think that's in a way the relational the relationship is critical as well as part of what addresses the underlying energy that hopefully
Uh-huh.
leads to the healing process, right? Because like that hierarchical, oh, do what the doctor says, that kind of robs the client or patient of the agency that I think if we can, the lack of agency that may in fact be part of the foundation or the root of the problem in the first place, right? But building more of a partnership, as you say, 100%, yeah, that goes a long way, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like, and clearly you get it. I think, like I said, a lot of Western practitioners understand this. The problem is the system is so big that, like, you can't just destroy that in your own little hospital system. You're not gonna take down big pharma by yourself. And once again, I'm not saying that big pharma, like, yeah, we don't have polio. That's kind of amazing. Yeah, you know? But at the same time, uh and it's not I'm not above taking Advil, but if I have a headache, well, why is that? Did I not get enough sleep? Am I dehydrated? Did did I get hit in the head? What's going on? And looking at it as a more broad picture, I think can really help people navigate that on their own. Um, and it's weird because I don't know if this is happening in Canada. I would assume it's happening globally. This kind of
Mm.
health coach movement.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm always so torn about it because I feel like, anyone can offer a certification and it's not a regulated thing, right? If we do something wrong, somebody pulls our card, right? We're in front of a board, they're saying that's not how we do this and you cause this damage. When you're a
Mhm.
health coach, you're kind of like, well, I'm not a licensed professional. I don't, sorry, I didn't know what I was doing, and they kind of wash their hands of it. And on the other
Mhm.
hand, I feel like that's kind of a role that's needed, and it's probably needed by healthcare practitioners, right? They should be the ones
Yeah.
advocating for the patients and holding the hands a little bit. But like I said, the system doesn't allow it. It's just
Mhm.
not the way we do things.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with you 100%. And I think as far as like a health coach or a health advocate, what I envision, and it's happening now already, it's not surprising, but I think
Yeah.
AI is allowing people to, because I even use it for my own health. I'll just
Yeah.
type something into Chat GPT and then say, hey, like, what would you suggest, and this and that. And so I think that's going to be a real benefit of the technology is just bridging that gap often
Oh
between
yeah. Yeah.
maybe what would be called health literacy and advocating. So you can go to the doctor and you can have a list of questions that make the whole process more efficient and you can get what you want out of it more than just coming and kind of feeling like, you're kind of like a deer in the headlights.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, like, literally, I had somebody come in yesterday who said, "Here's what Chat GPT said." And she showed it to me, and I mean, it was spot on.
Hmm.
And it's real funny because we talked about this on my podcast. There was an experiment with AI, and I believe the subreddit is called Ask a Doc or something like that, right? So what people do is they go on and they go, "Look, I got all these symptoms. What's going on with?" And they turned AI loose to give answers. And they then asked the people that posted their health questions, "Who do you think gave you the best answer? Who was the most compassionate?" And the crazy thing was, not only was the I think 60 or 70% more accurate, they
Yeah.
rated it as 80% more compassionate. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's because doctors don't care. I think it's because we bred a culture where give me the facts. Let's get to the diagnosis. Let's get you out the door. Rather than, oh my God, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And it doesn't have to be like this bleeding heart, over the top speech, but
Yeah.
just understanding, I know you're suffering. That's a big statement right there. And I think, the way we practice Western medicine doesn't allow for that. Right. I
Mhm.
mean, you probably don't have time to go, "Hey, how are the kids? How are they?" Yeah, it's why?
Yeah.
Because that's not billable. That is
Yeah.
not that does not make the system money, and it's
Yeah.
sad because there's a lot we can learn from that. "Oh, I didn't realize you had a family history of this." "Why?" "Oh, because I talked about your mom." You know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just and I think AI will definitely aid in that. I mean, I've seen things about AI with East Asian medicine, At first, I was like, "Oh, I don't think that'll help," and then, no, we're talking about a very soft medicine with a lot of different variables that are,
Mm,
like, when we get it right, it looks like witchcraft. No, you did this, you said that. These 3 things point me down this hole. I looked,
yeah.
and sure enough, there was something there. And it
Mm,
it it looks bizarre, but it's no, it's thousands of years of data points that seem unrelated if you look at it from somewhere else. Uh,
mhm,
and when you get that right, it looks supernatural, and you're like, "No,
yeah,
here's the system, here's the charts, here's what it says in this book. You said these 3 things, it does that. You said this, it puts you over here. Here's what I came up with." And
yeah, yeah.
thousands of years of
Mm,
data is basically what it is.
yeah,
And it's just, it's not a sixth sense. It's you hear something long enough and it sticks.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that, that whole notion of the har harnessing that power of the ancient wisdom, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's a reason why these practices have survived over centuries, right? It's just, yeah, I mean, I remember having a discussion with a friend of a friend a couple of years ago, and he was telling me about how he had a really severe inflammatory disease and was on all kinds of potent medications for many years and not getting any better. And then he did his own reading, and this probably would have been accelerated for him had he had access to
Yeah,
ChatGPT
yeah,
back
yeah.
then. But through his own research, he eventually just landed on intermittent fasting, and you know, after, a few months of that, he was essentially symptom free. And we ended up discussing, and it kind of boiled down to this idea that, well, what all ancient wisdom traditions kind of have as foundational practices? Well, prayer and fasting, right?
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
a reason for that in terms of what correlates with the society's health and well-being, right?
It's so funny, and I'm shying away from the term biohacking quite a bit now, and I think because it the people that are pushing that term have no concern about public or social health. Right. I'm okay. So screw all of you. Which is not how we have a healthy society, which does not make healthy individuals. But like, I don't need to take on the big guys, right now. I'm a nobody to them, except I do have a license. They don't. But anyway, within that, it always is so amazing to me because I mean, you hit it right on the head there, where it's like we're talking about a traditional practice, right? Now, big business in not eating, right? Like fasting, right? Well, every culture had that, and we our access to food in some ways is causing some of this, and our access to the not healthy foods even more so. But we were hungry a lot more a long time ago, right? We
Mm,
haven't evolved to this point where we're different humans. Since we've been humans, this is our brain, this is our body, this is how it functions.
mhm.
The services at my office, if you were outside more, if you were in harmony with nature, as they would say in the Taoist texts, you would need a lot of them, right? Saunas are amazing. Cold plunge is amazing. Well, if you're outside now, you get cold. You're outside in
Yeah.
the summer, you get hot, and it's like we did that seasonally. If we lived like that, um, I think it would knock out a lot of my services. I think we'd see a reduction in chronic health issues. And that would be the same with eating foods. I mean, oh, the seed oils are inflaming everybody. Yes, but they're easy to get. And fried food tastes delicious, right? So it's this double-edged sword where yes, we know. I mean, God, tell somebody who smokes to stop smoking. Yeah, right. No, I can't. I love this. Yeah, so we know it's wrong. But it's hard to escape that when that's in our society. And I think being in harmony with nature more would fix a lot of that, a lot of our chronic diseases.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, totally. I mean, it strikes me, it makes me think of concepts like energy fields and,
Yeah.
so maybe if you don't mind explaining a little for viewers and listeners about concepts and practices like
Yeah.
acupuncture and
Yeah.
cupping. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this because classically, When they were teaching us, right, and they were teaching us about the channels and this concept of chi or energy that's flowing through the body, what they were saying was this was kind of a black box theory, right? I do something to you, I get an outcome. I'm not so sure what's on the inside, and now we found some scrolls in some caves that are like, no, they were actually doing cadaver dissection. We thought they weren't, right? No, Buddhist country, don't cut them open. Well, Taoism's older than Buddhism. China's been around a long time. Hey, these have some pretty accurate sketches of anatomy internally. So we had some ideas, right? We ate animals and we cut them open, and I think I just used "we" to describe myself as Asian. I apologize, but within that, um, it wasn't a complete black box theory, right? We had an idea of what was inside. We had an idea of what it did, and we knew that if we stimulated the body in certain ways, we got these outcomes. So slowly, and I believe it started with simple practices like touch, right? Because we don't need any tools. That was an interaction between humans, even nonverbal, right? I can put my hands on you, you know I'm there, and I can press, and that's going to have a stimulation on your physical being, which is going to hit things inside too.
Mm,
And I think over time, somebody might come and say, "Oh, my head hurts," and press, and you press the whole body, and you'd find these spots that started to hurt, and then we started to develop these channels, and then on these channels, we started to add points, and it seems like a real natural evolution. Now, this concept of chi, this concept of energy, before we had blood work, before we could Doppler veins and say, "Oh, here's how the blood flow is," before we knew exactly where the nerves went, we had to have a way of describing what happens when we either add herbs to it, when we touch it, when we penetrate it with a needle, when we burn moxa on it, or any other herb that we used to burn on the skin. Um, and we'd see this cascade effect. It wasn't just one system. So it's very difficult to say, oh, we say we smooth the chi and fix the energy in the body, and now the body returns to health. Um, yes, but when we look at it from a Western standpoint, we still don't know the why putting that needle in triggers this huge cascade effect. But we know locally, in Japan, they'll call it an artificial splinter. We're going to get more blood flow there. Why? You pierce the surface of the skin. This is a natural healing response. You don't have to overdress that, right? Something goes through your skin. What's it going to do? It's going to get a little red. Why? Because we put fresh blood there. So locally, that needle has an effect on that tissue. Um, some other effects that happen, increased, and this comes down to autonomic nervous system function, which I love, right? Because a lot of these traditional services are really playing with fight or flight versus rest and digest.
yeah.
Knowing that if we have you in sympathetic, you're not getting good distal circulation, right? All the blood vessels are active, right? We know our cortisol levels are. After about 10 or 15 minutes of acupuncture, and I would say with cupping and massage, this is probably the same.
Mm,
Um, your body goes into rest and digest. Oh, I'm safe. I'm relaxed. All the
mhm,
blood vessels open up. Now I'm getting more blood flow, not only to the extremities, which if you're coming in for injury, this is bathing in fresh blood, knocking out any metabolic waste that might be in a joint or in muscles, lactic acid, whatever. Cytokines is the buzzword.
mhm,
Um, but flushing that tissue, getting fresh blood with fresh oxygen, fresh nutrients, right? That blood is also circulating to the lungs and the intestines and picking up nutrients and oxygen. So it's better quality blood. What we
mhm,
also see happening during this time, is regulation of hormones, right? This is why we can help so much with fertility and things like that. We're getting
mhm,
better circulation to those glands, which allows those hormones to be produced more efficiently in better levels. We see brain waves change, and this is one of the coolest things as a meditator for me is
mhm,
when you get acupuncture, your brain waves, those alpha and theta waves, look
yeah.
like meditative brain waves. You could be
Wow.
talking to me with needles in you,
Mhm,
and brain is registering as you're in deep meditation.
wow.
We know neurotransmitters are getting kicked out. Serotonin and dopamine are normalizing. Oxytocin
Mm,
goes up. And then I didn't know about this when I graduated because it wasn't talked about, but they discovered the endocannabinoid system in the 90s, right? We help kick out anandamide, the bliss molecule. This is amazing, right? So people leave feeling a little bit heady, a little bit high.
Yeah.
They're fine to drive, but that's an overall plus, right? So you might be coming
Mm,
in for low back pain and you're like, wow, my sleep got better, my digestion got better. And it's because when we put those needles in, it's not just one function in that point. There's a laundry
right.
list. And if your body needs them, you get all of them. Uh, and
Yeah.
and all this research that's been done, and this is kind of funny in the Cochrane database, acupuncture has more systematic reviews than physical therapy and chiropractic put together. And I'm not knocking either of those disciplines. I'm
Mhm.
just saying most of that research was originally to discredit acupuncture.
Mm,
Yeah, we got lumped with new age medicine. I have
mm,
not had an Asian teacher that ever, was like, let's play some singing bowls and, light some incense. There's plenty of value in that. I'm not even saying there isn't value in that, but they were much
mm.
more. All of my Chinese teachers were MDs in China.
Yeah.
So we would have orthopedic conversations. And then it's like, well,
Mm.
what about the spirit in this? Oh yeah, that's there. It was kind of downplayed. It was like, why?
Sure. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we can get them an MRI now. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
True.
to keep that alive, I almost feel like the West kind of lumped us in with new age medicine, and there was a little fight for credibility for a while.
Yeah.
Certainly when I see people talking about dry needling now, I'm like, oh, now you're just appropriating. This is now you've gone the other way, right? It's not.
Yeah.
Not only is it valuable, I can't call it what you called it all these years.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
funny.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it strikes me that it's probably a function to a large extent of the dualistic thinking that's kind of
Yeah.
just what we've inherited in the West from the Enlightenment, in terms of mind body duality and distinction. But I think interestingly, like it's really fascinating what you were saying, particularly about how acupuncture changes, EEG findings and brainwaves
Yeah.
into what looks like a meditative state because I think consciousness, like, of course, it's a huge mystery, right? But I think what some of the things that have been coming out recently in consciousness research, and I think also driven by AI kinds of like things in terms of how robotics are developed, is that this idea of consciousness, I think, must necessarily involve an understanding of an embodied consciousness, right?
Mhm.
So it makes sense. Even the theories of consciousness, like there's these really cool, interesting theories, like electromagnetic wave theory of consciousness, and as opposed to more of like a typical Western reductive idea of consciousness as arising from brain neurotransmitter function or something. Perhaps the actual electromagnetism in the brain and the body is actually more foundational to consciousness. And so that might make sense in terms of how modifying those energy fields and in that sense with practices like acupuncture actually work to change consciousness for the better and alleviate symptoms, right?
And that's, I'm glad you brought that up because God, I've been I heard about this thing and the professor is Canadian. There was an MD, I believe he was a psychologist, Dr. Person. Uh, he
Oh yeah, right.
developed
Yeah.
the God helmet, basically, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And there's
and now
magnetic
I'm
stimulation.
about to buy a personal device called the Shiva system because I want to play with that consciousness, right? People are putting this helmet on in a lab and having alien abduction experiences. People are putting this helmet on in a lab and hearing the voice of God. And it's such a weird thing because i- if you said that, let's say before the second wave of the psychedelic revolution, we'll call it that, um, and you were a doctor, oh, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to go near patients, and at least the questions can be asked now, right? Andrew Weil isn't this weirdo, anymore. Maybe covered in mud on the cover of Time magazine wasn't wasn't the look that you would see a traditional practitioner do. But he was trying to he was ahead of the curve there. Um, but I think that is such a great question. When we relate that to Chinese medicine, consciousness, it's almost like, and God, if you get a Chinese medicine scholar listening to this, they're going to rip me apart. It's almost like this head that we have, right? That's extra wiring. Like,
Mm.
that is not where the consciousness exists, and they break it up into different organs in those channel systems, right? So, well, our intellect is in the spleen and stomach. Our corporal soul that dies with us is in the lung and the large intestines. Our etheric soul, that thing that is believed to go on, is in the liver and gallbladder, right? Our willpower is in the kidneys. Um, and it's so weird because even those emotional components are mapped out differently, right? We get a thought, we don't necessarily feel it in our head. And even here in the English language, we use expressions that sound just like Chinese medicine. I have butterflies in my stomach. Well, the emotion of the stomach is worry. I mean,
Mhm.
and that was not people that came up with that term reading Chinese texts. Um, it breaks my heart. Well, heart is joy or lack of joy in Chinese medicine. So, all these aspects. If Descartes, right? Ghost in the Machine was coined long after him, but it was attributed to his theories. Uh, you can't separate the ghost and the machine in Chinese medicine. It's just a matter of density, right? We're talking about electromagnetic frequency, how the atoms move, right? We start expanding that energy, it becomes more etheric, less substantial. And not in this crazy out there kind of new agey and here I am talking about the God helmet, and projecting our consciousness, but in this very the waves that affect me, right?
Yeah.
Here I have a Faraday cage. I'm in my basement office over the fuse box. Why? I know that affects me, right? We're going to start
Mm.
to see like there's people that, God, in some cases, maybe wearing a tinfoil hat because they think EMF's going to get them, right? Well, I don't talk on my phone, directly, or they have the gapped headphones, and there's some research there that's saying, well, that's not all in their head. So we're
Yeah.
we're we're finding out that we're sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Why, if our brain runs on that, if our body runs on electromagnetic signaling, it would make sense that a strong frequency is going to alter that system.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's, as you say, I mean, everyone's complicated in their own way. Everyone's
Yep.
nuanced in their own way. And so for people to be, I think the important thing again, it comes back to agency for people to be empowered to look into what are their options. It helps them to understand themselves to a greater extent. And I think that just provides them with that, optionality, and it empowers them to be able to exercise their agency in the interest of helping themselves get more healthy, right? I think that's really powerful because I think, the alternative, the maybe old fashioned way of just being more passive and just taking the prescription and just assuming that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
that's going to be productive for people.
I'm glad it's happening, and I don't think it's an affront to medicine. I think it's a redefining of how we do things.
So,
You're right, empowering, giving patients agency. Um, and that was one of the things learning East Asian medicine that I really liked, right? They would describe point locations in some cases. It's like, well, why would you say it like that? Oh, because you would tell the patient how to find the point and go home and do this, right?
mhm.
Empowering them. And practices that were, you know, oh, you're too far away or I can't get to you. At least there's something you could do at home. So a lot of the practices that were always folk medicine that came into a more clinical setting were often turned back over. So that agency is now, look, I'm going to show you what to do, but now it's on you.
Mhm.
Like, even with PT, right? A lot of them give prescriptive exercises. Well, yeah, you might be going to the center and doing the exercises while you're there, but you're only going a couple times a week. Are you doing them on the days that you're not there? Right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You want to move faster, you want to get better, you do these recovery exercises.
Mhm.
Um, so how much you can empower yourself, how much even with the center, cold plunge tubs are getting cheaper and cheaper. Red light panels are getting cheaper and cheaper. And it's like,
Yeah.
Now I'm finding myself in some cases where patients were coming in and using our membership to really just get the max benefit going like, look, I found a really good panel at a great price. Okay, great. How do I use it? Now I'm more in a
Mhm,
consulting role, which on one hand, as a businessman, no, you got to come in and spend the money here. But on a patient advocacy, on a
mhm,
patient sovereignty, that's amazing. I'm so glad you did that. Now give me a call. We'll talk about when you need to use that. Is this a seasonal thing? Are you going to use this for acute recovery? Are we using this for long term health? And their questions change, but they're much
mhm.
more savvy. And
Right.
it's that convergence. It's definitely AI. It's definitely the way we're moving with technology. It's the access to the information.
Mhm,
Photobiomodulation's been around for 50 something years,
mm.
but it hit that critical mass, right? Whole body cryotherapy was invented in Japan in 1978, and
Yep.
I learned about it when I saw, Mayweather Pacquiao's fight. The preview. There's Floyd Mayweather in a cryo chamber. What the hell is that? And I started asking questions. Um, so it really is nice to see that come around, and I think for the benefit of humanity as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear about your center and the work that you and your team are doing there. For people who are interested, I'll put links to Tom's various programs and content in the show notes as well. But yeah, no, I'm sure that if people have questions, I'm sure that Tom would be happy.
Yes.
People reach out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because even the word doctor, right? And I don't have the fancy MD after my name, but that doctor is docere to teach, right? So
Mhm.
in this case, it's what do I know about, and that's East Asian medicine, and all these cutting edge technologies or whatever you want to call them. In my head, they all sound like East Asian medicine. Why? I'm reducing inflammation. I'm increasing circulation. I
Yeah.
have a whole body effect. Okay. I'm working on multiple systems at once, you
Mhm.
know? A
Yeah.
and, if we do it right, it doesn't look like much happened. You feel a lot better, but that's the goal. You're not coming out, uh, you feeling like you're beat up, you're feeling like you've been restored, and you feel like you're functioning better.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, for sure. I'm curious about cupping. I can
Yes.
remember in the summer seeing maybe at the pool or at the beach, noticing someone who's got these huge red circles on their all well, not huge, but these red circles all over their backs and thinking, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel it.
yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. I was in a grocery store with my wife. My wife's at one end of the aisle. There's a woman who, was like 100% CrossFitter. She's living her best life. She's super muscular, jacked. She looked great. The short gym shorts and a sports bra. She walks past me. My wife sees me looking at her back. She thinks I'm looking at her ass. My wife makes a face. I'm like, no, 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 no. Wait, wait. She walks past her back, circles on top of circles on top of circles. This woman, if she wasn't doing competitive CrossFit, I don't know who could. She was prime shape. And I was kind of impressed with the level, the intensity of cupping because I've seen some people overdo it. I think the dose was the right amount for her. But that like it was like the cups were interlaced because there wasn't an ounce of her not covered. Um but looking at her muscle mass, her low body fat, and probably the intensity of the workouts she was doing, that was probably sufficient. But cupping, and one of the things I love about cupping is that it's not even Chinese in origin. We don't know where it came from per se, right? That's lost to medical history. The earliest references are the Ebers Papyrus, ancient Egypt. But we know if it was written down, it was talked about, it was practiced long before that. Hippocrates wrote about it. The Persian physicians wrote about it. And somehow it migrated from that little area around the Mediterranean to the entire globe, where South America had it several thousand years ago. We don't know that South America was necessarily talking to the rest of, the other hemisphere.
Right.
Um, so it is older than acupuncture. It's older than a lot of other therapies, but it comes down to blood flow, right? We knew that if we created a vacuum and put that on the surface of the skin, we were pulling fresh blood into that area. So yes, you're creating a small local, inflammation, right? We're flooding that tissue with blood, but the net positive was systemic increase in circulation, especially through that tissue, because the damaged tissue that may be deeper, we're pulling that blood to the surface. We're pulling it into that interspace between the fascia and the muscle, the fascia and the skin. Rupturing those capillaries at the surface is just kind of a side effect of the negative pressure. But deeper, up to 6 inches deep, we're seeing an increase in circulation. So I'm not sure who decided to do that first, but it was really a brilliant low tech solution to get more blood flow to him.
Mhm. That's really fascinating that it developed in societies that were disparate and that it wasn't necessarily kind of brought
Yeah,
through
yeah.
trade or anything. Yeah,
This coevolution, and certainly some of it was brought through trade.
sure.
Moxibustion is a technique where we burn an herb, normally mugwort, artemisia, on the surface of the skin or in a device near to heat and increase circulation. Eh, I just finished a book that's been around probably for a decade or so that's really trying to break down the history. And he includes a lot of global stuff. He includes a lot of like scarification that was done in Europe, a little bit more dark ages, coining with like heating a coin and actually burning it on the skin. Um, but he mentions a place called Bactria, which is in currently northern Afghanistan, which was like a Marrakesh, where you had these cultures coming in that we thought didn't interact, right? So here's this, not prehistoric, but very early history where you have redheaded people in caves with kilts on being buried next to Middle Eastern and Asian people, and you're like, well, that you guys weren't the silk trade route wasn't a silk trade route yet. How the hell were
Mhm.
you all doing that? So I do think culturally we all migrated for a long time. And certainly if you do your 23andMe, yeah, you might be pretty white, but there's probably somebody else in there too if you go
Mhm.
back far enough. And it's amazing that these classical therapies survived, grandma's medicine is what they used to call cupping. When I was teaching at a school in Manhattan, large international students come in, take the program, and either stay in the States or go back home. Every one of them said grandma used to do that, talked about cupping. It didn't matter if it was Eastern Europe, Russia, China, all over Europe, South America. Um, and the technique was a little bit different. Fire cupping certainly it just uses heat to eat the oxygen, right? We're not heating the cup itself. And today we have plastic and silicone where we don't need the fire and we don't have to worry about breaking glass or clay pots or anything like that. But the tech is still really low. It's just creating that vacuum.
Mhm.
Feel like I was
Yeah.
rambling there for a second.
No, no, no,
Sorry.
not at all. No, I mean, I think it's just so fascinating because I honestly haven't learned anything about it. So, it's really interesting. So, and you wrote a book, the cupping book, right?
Yeah, yeah, and this
And
this is
it
supposed to
mhm,
be like grandma's teaching you. This is not meant to be a great scholastic work. I don't want this sitting in, classrooms for future acupuncturists. I want to put this back in the hands of people, right? If you remove the
mhm,
fire and breakage of the cups themselves, you've made it exponentially like it was already safe, right? If you knew
mhm,
what you were doing, you probably weren't going to burn somebody.
right.
Um, and certainly I'm not gonna take that away from grandmas that are doing it, but if you can hop on any online retailer and get a good quality set of cups for 20 bucks, you're in Vancouver, walk into an
Mhm.
Asian market, you will find tons on the shelves
Yeah, yeah.
for for
That's
for
cool.
little to no investment, and
Mhm,
I mean, the book's 130 pages long cover to cover, so what,
Mhm.
120 pages of actual writing with photos. You can bang through that in an hour or two and have enough to get going and hopefully feel competent and comfortable to actually start doing cupping on yourself and doing cupping on others. Certainly, you're limited by what you can reach on yourself, but
Mhm.
friends and family, I mean, this is something that's done on kids, and unfortunately, back in the day when these techniques, cupping and gua sha, which is scraping, were done in certain ethnic populations when they sent the kids to school and they saw these bruises, child protective services were called, right? Because there
Mm,
was
yeah,
cultural ignorance about what they were doing. Oh, the kid
yeah,
was sick. So you hit him with something? No, no, no.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
now that it's come around mainstream, growing up, my kids, this was commonplace for them. They wouldn't let me do it to them, but I'd come home and they'd be covered all over their bodies with marks. And then I'm like, "You gotta go to school tomorrow. There's gonna be questions."
That's right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, they're like, my dad's an acupuncturist, and they're like, "Oh, he's weird. That's okay." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, they for sure. They definitely that came up in our pediatric ER,
Yeah.
rotations for sure. We had to just bear that in mind, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the cultural
Yeah.
competency conversations are really quite interesting, and I think, we're definitely not there, and in some ways, we're going backwards. But I do think, seeing that and looking at how these cultures interact is particularly fascinating, and I think there's a lot to learn there, right? In that Venn diagram of EBM, right? A big part of that is what does the culture say,
Mm,
and I like
mhm,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious as well, your program, offering therapies like the red light therapy and the
yeah,
cryotherapy, sauna, you mentioned cold plunges already. Can you
yeah.
let us know a little about those types of strategies?
So, really, the goal wasn't to provide everything because let's face it, if we hopped on a couple of websites, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars of equipment I would love to have. Um, what I wanted to do was look at what was the most accessible, what had the most research behind it, what made the most sense for the type of people I was trying to reach. And then, like, we used to have hyperbaric. It wasn't a metal one, it was a soft shell one, which in the States is only FDA cleared for altitude sickness. I'm in a harbor city. There's in the past, my office has been underwater in hurricanes, uh, where no one's getting altitude sickness. But the idea of getting excess oxygen into the body to help with TBIs, to help with autism, to help with all these off-label stuff. I mean, that's who's using soft shell chambers. The problem was logistics, right? I couldn't make it affordable enough to be able to operate it with
Yeah.
somebody using it 6 days a week for an hour. So we had to change. So that was another criteria that was a learning process for us. Now we use something called exercise with oxygen therapy, which is more about playing with the physiology and having somebody sprint at quote unquote high altitude to strip the red blood cells and then flood their body with recovery with oxygen, which they'll pull into the serum more effectively than forcing it in with pressure. Um, so the idea was what would be quick for people? What was going to be a service that once I show you how to use this, yeah, go ahead, head on back into the room. The red light's all ready for. And red light therapy. Certainly, we run you through cryo ourselves. Cold plunge, right? Here, you're gonna get changed. I'll pull the curtain shut. Go ahead, hop in. Salt therapy. These things were somewhat passive for us as practitioners, but moved patient towards health overall, right? Reduce
Yeah.
inflammation, increase circulation, help with oxygen exchange and metabolism, without too much heavy lifting by either us or the patient.
Mhm.
We have like a gym membership for that because this isn't none of the stuff we do is a one and done. It's a therapy. A lot of these services, spas are picking them up. Why? Because they're not quote unquote medical, but
Yeah.
all the research done on them certainly is.
Yeah.
So can I reframe people's thinking? And in my head, that all sounds like Chinese medicine: reduce inflammation, improve circulation. improve function.
Mm,
So not even aim at a disease, right? Somebody will come in and say, "Oh, can I use this for TBI?" Yeah. Well, here's what the research says, right? We don't have the cap for hair growth for red light, or they were even using that for TBI as well.
mm,
But we know that if you go on the whole body one, you're gonna get that as a side effect. Why? Because your head's in it.
mm,
So if we can hit whole body, we don't have to worry about being targeted as well. So
yeah,
it's a nice way of me being super lazy and saying I can cover everything all at once, and say that I'm treating inflammation, knowing that inflammation is like an underpinning symptom of most pathologies.
yeah, for
Say
sure.
that we're treating stress, improve circulation, and even if I'm not knocking it out of the park and curing somebody, which is a weird term, we're giving that body some ability to heal. We're giving it some fuel to fight, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. This whole idea of hormetic stress,
Yeah.
with like the Wim Hof and all that, it's really taking off and for good reason. And it also, like we were talking about before, I mean, this is in some ways where we're relearning ancient practices and trying to just harness the benefits of those and encourage people to integrate these practices into their daily living, whether it's having a cold rinse after your daily shower for a few seconds or doing a cold plunge or whatever. I think it's so interesting, this idea of not shying away from discomfort. I think it's a real, there's like a philosophical aspect to that as well. And that's
There
how you
is.
grow out of
Yeah.
it, right? Yeah.
I and it's funny where and this doesn't certainly have to be a conversation about homeopathy, but this hermesis is just that at a more intense level, right?
Mm,
Homeopathics, I mean, you could have less than a mole of a compound in it, and so that's supposed to be the strongest. I don't have a dog in that fight, by the way. Um, but within that, you see people turning to that. But I do think if we look at things like uh, cardiovascular issues are a major
mm,
issue, diabetes is a major issue. Part of it is because our life got too soft, too simple. And I'm not a rugged tough guy by any means. But like look, people eat a lumberjack's breakfast, but they're not going to go out and do a lumberjack's work. So yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like that guy
yeah.
that up and eating a stack of pancakes and half a plate of bacon and then sausage. He was then like climbing up trees and knocking down redwoods for 8 to 12 hours. That was barely enough fuel, but
Yeah.
now go and do that. And we're wondering why we have diabetes.
Yeah.
It's the sheer volume. It's not just the quality of it. It's like, oh God, I really want a burger. I love burgers. That's a
Mm,
1,500 calorie meal, just the burger.
yeah.
And it's because we're a little too comfortable, right? We have this concept, and it's very funny. It was taught to me as a theoretical organ, right? We have a channel called the Sanjiao, triple heater, triple warmer, triple energizer is often how it's translated.
Mm,
And the idea was it was a way of signaling and water metabolism through the body, right? These classical concepts. Well, not that long ago, but definitely pre-COVID, and everything gets a little blurry there for me. Pre-COVID, a surgeon discovered this organ, the interstitium, right? This thin membrane around the organs. Something about communication, something about fluid metabolism.
mm,
Line by line, if you laid out the classical Sanjiao description with the interstitium side by side, and you're like, how?
mm,
I was told that was a theoretical organ. It
mm,
wasn't a real thing,
yeah.
but maybe that's not the way it was taught. We know this
Mm,
has to happen, getting back to that black box theory.
yeah.
And then now we have somebody opening up and realizing that no, this isn't just membrane. This is its own tissue. This is its own organ.
Mm,
Uh, which is like it's just so crazy. Like, how did they know that
yeah.
kind of stuff?
Yeah.
You know?
It is amazing for sure. Like how you define systems and organs and physiology and how you break it down in a way, it engenders the division of the practice of various types of medicine into these
Yeah.
silos, and everyone gets to be an expert in the very subsection of whatever system that, whether it's your interventional cardiologist who's an expert in putting a stent in this one artery or what
Yeah.
have you, right? Where,
I,
and
I,
that's
you know,
fine. We need those people, obviously, also, the interstitium idea is super interesting because even with the brain, there's more and more research showing how
yeah.
the glial cells, which typically were considered to be just sort of like the scaffolding, the irrelevant, in some sense, irrelevant scaffolding that kind of helped to structure and nourish the neurons, which was where the money was at, right? But it's
Mm.
actually the glial cells in some sense are super important, maybe even form the basis of, or more of the basis of consciousness or those electromagnetic fields, these different theories of consciousness. So as you say, yeah, interstitium in all other parts of the body and how you define that, maybe that in and of itself is that system in a sense that makes more sense to define it as such and aligns more with these ancient East Asian kinds of principles as well.
It's so funny to me. I did Walter Reed Hospital Systems had me do some lectures, right? They unfortunately they just lost a physician, Dr. Nemitov, who came up with an acupuncture protocol, an ear acupuncture protocol called battlefield acupuncture. I believe he passed last week, but a major contribution to acupuncture as a whole, especially what we would call Western medical acupuncture. Um, but in one of the lectures, and they wanted me to do more integrative stuff, right? I pick a topic and just talk about it. We know what your wheelhouse is. And they let me go out and talk about all these kind of like resurgence of classical therapies, magnet therapy, leech therapy, all this stuff that you like, yeah, they were doing that in the dark ages. That's wrong. No, 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 no. Actually, they do that at Walter Reed now. Um, One thing that I stumbled across, which kind of shocked me, right? And this comes from quantum physics, right? We talk about these two particles that are not local to each other, but they're paired, right? We change the direction of one, the other one instantaneously, faster than the speed of light, not
Mhm.
connect, switches. When they did imaging of that, Westerners will know it as what they call a yin yang. It looks like a freaking Tai Chi is what the proper name is, Supreme Ultimate, but it's that yin yang fish swirling in an orb.
Sure,
And
sure.
and you go, that is a Taoist symbol that could be pushing 10,000 years old.
Mhm.
And you're telling me that quantum physics just discovered it?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
how did some guy sitting in a cave meditating
Totally.
figure out a
Totally.
quantum physics principle that wasn't gonna be discovered for another 10,000 years?
Yeah, yeah. These are interesting times because it's fascinating that these seemingly disparate approaches are coming together in these ways. It's really cool. It's really
Yeah,
cool. I mean,
and
yeah.
yeah, I believe this coalescence is really going to, and certainly we can pick any topic and dwell on it, get really hung up, and I get down in the dumps about, where we are as a society in the States and our
Mm,
our lack of compassion and all that stuff. But these things are happening, and I there is part of me that's like, oh, AI is going to cause some horrible problems. But well, one that they might be able to fix so much so quickly that we couldn't do
mhm,
before, and our access to information is only going to benefit us. And this coalescence between the physical technology, the AI, our knowledge base, our access to that knowledge. When you look at it that way,
mhm.
it's awe and wonder. Oh my God, this could be the greatest time to be alive. I'll be
Yeah, yeah.
crying
It's
in an
a
hour after this, but
that's
right
right.
now
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another practice, I mean, I guess we're getting a little short on time, but I was just curious to know, I mean, one practice that seems like it's a huge part of holistic health and mind body kinds of wellness practices is meditation. So I
Yeah.
was just curious. I know it's a big topic, but in broad strokes, how do you see meditation complementing acupuncture and cupping and other aspects of Eastern
Yeah.
health
Yeah.
approaches?
This
Yeah.
this gets back to that term yang shen, right? This kind of nourishing life, right?
Mm,
Meditation is a practice. I often joke that I've been meditating since '94. That's the first meditation book I read. I was the summer of my junior year of high school. Um, I did not have a daily meditation practice that stuck until I want to say about 6.5 years ago. And I leverage technology for that. I'm not plugging this product. I do love them. Muse meditation headbands. Just something to track my meditation. Look at the brain waves, right? They open that up on their platform, and now I can go, oh, that was a good meditation. Not only did it tell me how coherent I was, but it also showed me where my alpha and beta were, where my theta was. Well, my delta. Oh, I fell asleep during that one, right? I can see that now. But all of
Mm,
this adds up. Like I'm very ADHD. I self-diagnosed at this point, but um I have all those tendencies.
mm,
It took years of consistent daily meditation. I can focus pretty well when I have to. That doesn't mean every meditation's great. It's not like every workout is great, right? I've had some horrible workouts where like, ah, God, I think I tweaked something, right? I haven't
mm,
tweaked anything meditating, but I've had some really crappy meditations. But
mm,
the net positive in my I don't want to say grit, but my mental capacity and my ability to deal with stress yeah, I'll still get worked up about stuff. Oh God, I'm going to be late with this bill, or that's going to happen.
yeah,
But coming back down, or at least not getting to 10 out of 10 all the time has been huge. And I think when we talk about neuroplasticity, and this is another avenue where we're starting to learn more and more about, right? I mean, there was a time when we're like, oh, nerves don't regenerate. No, those pathways are the pathways, and now it's like, no, we have this ability to not only affect peripheral nerves, but central nervous system, and
mhm,
at neuroplasticity, we can fix our brain, we can rewire our brain, and
mm,
the stunning field of psychedelics as well. All of these
mm,
are avenues that eh, you know we can see this long-term positive. I feel better mentally now at 48 than I ever did as a teenager or a 20-year-old or hell, even
mm,
a late 30-year-old. And it's been the meditation practice, above all else, trying to work out and do that stuff. Yeah, yeah, that's a given too, but the meditation really stepped up, especially in the last year or so. And think about something that's free that you can do anywhere, right? If you're sitting on the bus, you just close your eyes. No one's gonna know. If you
mhm.
start chanting or something, maybe that's a little weird. But
Gosh,
it's a little different discipline, but maybe you get a little bit more
yeah.
space on the bus. Uh, but within that,
That's right.
all of these methods, and we're starting to see that, and we're starting to see people lean into that. Especially for PTSD, and there's so many devices too. I have a colleague from England. I didn't know it was him until we had him on the show. I went, "Oh shit, you're an acupuncturist." He came up with something called Sensate, and
Mm,
it sits on the chest, right? So it's not a vagal nerve stimulator like a pulsetto or something like that, which I like too. That's not so much meditation. That's
mm,
direct electric current on your vagus nerve. This sits there and it vibrates. And we had him
mm,
on the show, and he said a lot of the things that we've talked about, where it was like at one point we were outside a lot, right? And we knew if we heard the birds and they were chirping a certain way, everything was cool. No predators
yeah,
around. I don't have any danger. Birds
mm,
change tune, birds get quiet.
mm,
Oh, now my sympathetic nervous system should be going, what's coming?
mm,
Now we're like, my sympathetic system is going, everything's on fire all the time. My amygdala is just flooding my brain.
mm,
But meditation brings that down.
mhm,
Meditation has been shown to actually make the frontal lobe thicker,
mm.
as well as make the amygdala smaller, which is
Yeah,
like, that's crazy. What am I
totally.
doing?
Yeah,
I'm just sitting there not thinking, I
yeah,
mean, so many
yeah,
benefits.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I love that. As with a lot of these other things I've been talking about, it's accessible and it's free, right? You don't have to lay out a lot of time or money. I mean, it's just yeah. Would you say
Eh,
that meditation, like, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, once again, this is the perfect. because like, go to the library, Google something, download a free app and get
Mhm.
started. And this is the other thing, consistency over duration, right? So a daily practice of only a couple of minutes is going to get you further than sitting there one day and just trying to tough it out for 20 minutes, an hour, you know.
Yeah. I think that's a key message for people to encourage them with mindfulness or meditation is just to not make it another chore that adds stress to your life. Look at it as some sort of a break, and don't even just keep it simple and don't put a lot of pressure on, oh, what am I supposed to be doing? Or that frustration that most beginning meditators, I mean, I used to, I mean, I took a John Kabat-Zinn. I did a
Okay.
seminar with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Santarelli and just a little close up to where Monterey Bay is down there. It was really cool. It was sort of like a week long thing, and there was a 24-hour silent kind of meditation thing,
That's
and
great.
which was cool. But at the end of the day, I found it tough to integrate it into a kind of busy schedule with young kids and that. So I kind of just try and do a mindfulness practice while I'm biking to work or something like that, or while I'm swimming.
And that's what qigong is, right? It's a moving meditation. That's yoga was done to get you ready for a seated meditation. So, there's so many ways to do it, and as long as you find what works for you, I mean,
Mhm.
that's the most important. I mean, there in the martial arts world, the debate was always, "What's the best martial art?" And the answer is the one you practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Totally.
Because like it does me no good. I get no benefit if I'm not practicing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love that. That makes sense. Well, Tom, I think we should wrap up.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can let listeners and viewers know where can people learn more about your work, your clinic, and the cupping book.
Yeah, so I mean, the Cupping Book is thecuppingbook.com. It's available on every online book retailer. But the central hub of everything where you can kind of get more information about me, the practice, what we offer, get in touch with me for, lectures and stuff like that is charmcityintegrative.com. Baltimore's nice nickname is Charm City. It is a great little city. I don't care what anyone else says. But I love it. The charmcity.com will get you to me, the services, the book, and any other information you want. I mean, if you want to pour over my CV, I think there's a link on there too. It's not
I'm sure it is. No, it's been great. It's been a really interesting
bad.
conversation. It's been great to meet you and be great to keep in touch as well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely. This was a great conversation. I'm glad. It's nice to be able to look at a real high level view of stuff. Normally, we're trying to break it down to make it as accessible as possible, but we got into some really really fun stuff today.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And again, we'll put links in the show notes and, happy if folks have questions or comments for the comment section and we'll continue to build community about these interesting
Yeah.
topics. So thanks again, Tom. Really appreciate it. Have a great
Oh,
rest
thank you
of the
so
day.
much for having me. You too.
Okay. Take care. Cheers. Thanks a lot.